Hola, Animigos, and welcome to Keyframers, the animated collaborative coding live stream where we bring imaginative user interfaces to life. I'm your host, Stephen Shaw.
And I'm your host, David Khourshid.
Together we are coding compadres, animation amigos, Boolean buddies, and keyframe companions.
Yeah, so we are going to be creating a UI from scratch live using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, especially using the XState library and just having a nice, simple intro to it today. Of course, we're happy to answer any questions that you may have, so please reach out in the chat or comments.
Yes. This is an exciting episode. Something you proposed is doing the 7 GUI tasks. This is kind of a common list, would you say, of like kind of boilerplate coding examples for you to get familiar with different languages?
Yeah, so basically the whole philosophy behind the 7 GUIs is it's 7 gradually harder and more complex GUIs to code, just to highlight how easy it is to use a certain framework or language or library to accomplish all the goals in those UIs. And so it's sort of like taking to-do MVC to the next level. The first task is the easiest one. It's a temperature converter, if I got that right. Or
the first one is the counter.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're doing a temperature converter. Not a counter, I believe, right?
Well, we can probably knock out, two.
So
2 or 3.
Sure. So we could do the counter and the temperature converter, but those are fairly simple tasks. Then it gets more advanced. You have a flight booker, which is like one of those forms that you would implement with validation and changing options, meaning the fields have to change too. And then the timer. So you're dealing with signals of, just elapsed time and duration and things like that. And it just gets harder and harder. The hardest one is cells, and it's basically asking you to make a mini Excel, which is not easy. So
oh boy, yeah.
We'll tackle that when we get to it.
Table?
Yeah. I mean, it's, harder than that, but yep.
This is really fun stuff. You've probably done a lot of these kinds of tasks when you're just like getting familiar with React or getting started with a new language or library, and so we'll kind of be featuring those using XState, and I guess we'll just kind of get started with counter here, and David's got a little bit of setup in our the tiniest bit. Let me get David bumped up a little bit. The microphone. David in the chat saying he's very excited for this. It's incredibly useful to see XState used to build UIs. Having the visual interface as the goal helps learn a ton. That's for sure.
Yep, I did say that in the chat. Just kidding, it's a different David.
A different David, David Lure. XState. If you're unfamiliar, I don't have it auto completed.
How's my microphone coming in? Hopefully, it's a little better now.
Yeah, visually it looks balanced, but it's hard for me to have it exact on there. Let us know if that's having trouble. XState. Library that's quite fun, that is going to power the state machines we use to build this UI. So I'm sure David will explain more of those concepts as we go, but that's
I will.
Starting
yes.
point.
And actually, these two first examples, both the temperature converter and the counter, are excellent examples for showing how non-scary or non-frightening, non-intimidating XState can be, because it's basically like if you've used Redux or anything like that, it's basically like that, except with some, if you've ever played bowling, you have those gutters on the side, like those gutter things. It sort of gives you a lot of protection.
Bumper bowling.
Bumper plates, or bumper, whatever they're called. It gives you a lot of protection and safety around your state so that you could model your state to avoid getting into impossible states. But for these two examples, we're just going to use it as a simple state manager. And yeah, you're going to see how not intimidating it could be. And I'm going to give Shaw and myself, if I get to it, complete creative freedom on how we actually build these forms.
Yes.
The 7GUI says, you could really just design them however you want, but it has to fit the requirements. So not the visual requirements, the actual, logic.
Right.
Everything.
Yes. Yeah, so we'll get started with counter. One of the, speaking of visuals, I stumbled across these kind of GUI mock-ups of like merging classic macOS and classic Windows that should be fun to kind of style our stuff with. So we'll kind of take those visual cues to make things fun and go from there.
Yeah. So I was going to say, like, all right, let's wait for Shaw to actually build out the UI so I can start adding event listeners and things to it. But the beauty about using state machines in XState is that you could start modeling the states before any of the UI work is done. So I could get started right away. And we call this const counter machine equals create machine. And so for our counter machine, we're only going to basically be keeping track of a number. And so I'm just going to give it an initial count of 0. And on inc, we are going to assign counts to the counts plus 1. And there we go. Our machine's done.
Oh boy. So this is gonna
beat Shaw to it.
Yeah. Well,
but yeah.
No, this is good. Right. So counter machine. We're creating a machine from XState. We've got our context. This is like the state that we're storing. And whenever we send through the inc event, XState will execute this action of assigning or like updating the value of that context, so that we're adding that value. And so this line right here, line 10. Move your cursor. There we go. Line 10. So this is kind of a pattern sometimes you see with React, like use state, where you give it a function instead of a value, so that you can reference the current value and return a new value. So in this one, David's referencing the context there and returning the count plus 1, rather than like trying to store things in global variables or functions that are constantly updating because of new state and things like that. This allows you a simple way to do that.
Right. Right. And so if I wanted to test out this logic without having the UI in place just yet, I could just, let's set an interval. So I'm going to say counter service dot send inc, and let's do it every second. So see how that looks. I think I'm infinite looping myself, or something's happening.
Unexpected string. There's a string there at the end. That should fix it. There we go. All right, count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Hey, looks good to me. Okay.
And so what we basically did was we assigned an event, which is inc, that actually does stuff in the machine. And right now it's just incrementing a counter. And all we really have to do is attach that to an event listener. So
if you're hearing strange noises, there is a massive thunderstorm happening outside. So that is probably the source of the audio mishaps here.
So lcount equals document.query selector give it an ID. Count button. Unless you have any better ideas.
No, that's
all right. So lcounts.add event listener. Whenever we click that, we are going to send the inc event, and inc is for increments in this case, although I guess we could call it counts. So there we go.
Let's see. So that's good. All right. So yeah, that is not working yet.
ID count button, query selector, counts button. Oh, because send, I just have a naked send, that's why. Counter service.send counts. All right, glad it's a tiny mistake on my part, but now when you count, you see, you see stuff happening in the console. So now all we have to do is update the, Shaw has count input. So we are going to say const l count input equals count input. And we are going to say on transition, l counts input dot inner text, inner HTML. I don't know.
Value. Yeah, wow. It's probably.
What am I thinking? Sorry.
Probably what we want there.
State.context.counts. And there's our little side effect over there. And so you could see that counts is working.
Nice. Yeah, that's it. We're done.
That's it. Yep.
Thanks for streaming today. Yeah, that's very helpful to see. Just trying to get the UI in an interesting place. But yeah, let's walk us through that machine again. Now that we have it all in place.
Sure. So this machine only does two things. It holds the counts, which is, this variable, and it holds it in context. And that's because a machine has two types of state. It has the finite state. In this case, there's only one finite state, which it's just existing. And it also has extended states. And so that's kept in the context because it's sort of like contextual data that all the states can access, so to speak. And we also have you can think of it as an event listener over here. So whenever the count event happens, we're executing this action. Now you might be thinking like, all right, why can't counts just be a function and we just do stuff in there? And that's because assign is not the only action you could do. In fact, when you start like working with complex applications and modeling your state machines and state charts and adding all sorts of other features, you'll realize that there's so many other actions rather than just assigning to context that you could do. And if you've used Redux before, you'll run into this pretty quickly. You'll say that, okay, Redux is great at, if I need to update my state immutably, then I could do it there. However, when you get to side effects, things get a lot more hairy because you have to handle things in middleware. And you don't know exactly where to put stuff or when things should happen exactly. And that's what actions are for. So the interesting thing is that you could also have exit actions, entry actions, multiple actions for each of those. But right now we're just doing actions on transition right over there. So, wow, you really improved these styles. This is great.
Trying.
That is old school. I love it.
Yes.
It's like a neo old school.
Right. Yeah. It's definitely not true to classic UIs, but inspired by.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Well, so yeah, there's our counter machine. So the counter service is what actually brings the machine to life. This is what's actually running the machine this, the create machine really doesn't have any like special logic or anything like to it, right? Like it's just kind of creating a machine class. Is that?
It's not like, well, yeah, you could think of it as like an object, right? So this counter machine is sort of like a blueprint for how your state should update in response to events. And so when we interpret that machine, we're creating an instance of that. So we're taking that machine blueprint and we're actually making it a live entity that we could send events to.
Gotcha. Okay.
All right. Shall we tackle number 2?
Sure. Do we need to fork this, I guess?
We could just do it here.
Okay.
Or, well, yeah. Yeah, we could fork it. Let's fork it.
Okay. Give me a minute. Talk about something interesting, and I'll create a new one from this.
All right. Yeah. If you're listening to the stream, then these machines you can actually visualize. And I remember about a year ago, Sean and I were playing with getting the inspector to work. And so I'm not too confident that, it could work as is in CodePen. It's something that we have to take care of. But you can copy and paste the machine definition here and go to the visualizer. And by visualizer, I'm not just talking about the old visualizer we have on xstate.js.org/viz, but now you could go to stately.ai/viz and just copy your machine there. And this is our brand new visualizer that we've been working hard on for the last couple of months. And we're working on a lot of things, but this is one of them. And
share that link in the chat. Stately.ai/visualizer
/viz, V-I-Z.
Viz, of course.
Yeah. Now the machine we created is not going to look very interesting, but it is very clear, what it's doing.
Yeah. So if we paste that in, we can hit visualize. Sign is not defined. Gotta copy in more, I guess.
Yeah, you're gonna need to do the whole import create machine assign from XState.
Yeah. Fancy. Yeah, that's cool. All right. Let me get this other one going here. Come here. Give me a little window, and I'll share the link with you here. All right. So this David is number 2 for us. And
right.
Yeah, so instead of counter, so let's go back to the challenges here. And look at number 2 is the temperature converter.
Yeah, this is a little bit more tricky. Not too much more tricky, but just enough for it to be just an extra layer of challenge.
Yeah. So we'll have 2 inputs. And it'll just automatically update on input. We don't need a button.
I'll call one Celsius and I'll call one Fahrenheit. And you could also decorate those to have the C and the F. I don't know how you want to do that. I would probably wrap the inputs. I do wish that the inputs had pseudo elements that you could just add to the end, but
yeah, that'd be helpful.
Yeah. And so these will actually not be read-only, so
right.
a little bit of fun with that. And call this temperature machine. And now in our context, we're going to have C and F. So man, Fahrenheit is really fun to spell. But yeah,
good job on that.
And then we need to get Celsius and Fahrenheit. So this is going to be Celsius Fahrenheit. I wonder what that translates to in German.
Probably something very
temperature like, yeah.
intense.
That value equals state.context.c. Oh. All right, I regret spelling out the full thing. LC input, LF input, state.context.f. So right now they're undefined. That's fine. And now we have to do a little bit of math, but we're basically doing the same thing that we did in the previous machine. So let's see, Celsius actions assign. So we're going to have C as value and F as so return length greater than 0 times 9 divided by 5 plus 32. Otherwise, just an empty string. And we're going to do the same for Fahrenheit. So we're going to say F, C, and so this is going to be a little bit different math. So this is going to be minus 32 times 5 over 9. Wow, algebra. It's all coming back to me. Okay, cool. So now all we have to do is add event listeners. I mean, we could test it. And so this is something that I do want to sort of highlight. If I say counter service dot send, and I say, and this gets into a little bit more, I don't want to say advanced. It's just, you know, a more full representation of what XState actually is for. We could send event objects, just like you could do in Redux or related libraries. So I could say type F and give me a temperature. So.
How about 12?
12. Okay, so if I send that, then nothing's happening. Do we rename anything?
See input.
Console.log state.context. Probably a silly mistake. We'll see.
So the event should be wait, so on Celsius on.
You're right. So again, I regret the spelling out of those events, but there we go.
Hey, nice.
Okay, so now all we have to do is attach it to the event listener. So we could say lc input dot add event listener. Input, not change, but input, and counter service dot send.
Nice.
Oh, oops. Sorry, we have to. Sorry, I thought I could do that shortcut, but I can't because you actually have to send the type. So type. This is going to be C. Here. That value, and this is going to be F. I think that should work.
It is not. So the type still needs to be the full name.
Why did I do that? Sorry.
There we go.
I'm glad that when things aren't working, it's because of my silliness.
Okay, so add event listener input.
Or I think it's input at least.
It should be.
Oh, it's target.value.
Yeah.
I realized that just as I was console logging. All right, and someone in the chat probably caught that too. I'm not checking the chat though. There we go.
Okay. Yeah. I need to update the styles here, but we probably need a little bit of rounding there.
Yeah, just a little bit. So we could say math dot.
Let's see. Let's do a function. Value.
Oh, there's two fixed, so we could say this dot two fixed like 2, and then or cannot read property 2 fixed from undefined.
Oh, because we're initially sending through undefined.
Right.
Let's just start them out at 0, because 0 is 0 for both, right? No.
No.
What is it? There is one that's the same. I forget.
Sounds like a math problem. All right, negative 40. That's the number.
Negative 40. They are the same.
Negative 40.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right.
Nice and easy.
Yeah. All right. Very cool. Let me see. Trying to get another one set up for us here. So, all right. So let me. I'm always distracted as you're doing things. So let me walk through and see if I understand this machine correctly, because that's one of the benefits here is all the application logic is kind of wrapped up in this one little representation. So for a temperature machine, you're creating a machine with the context, the state of Celsius and Fahrenheit. Those are our kind of values that we want to keep track of. And whenever we're sending through the events of Celsius, take the action where we assign Celsius that exact value, because that value doesn't need any calculation on it, which that's currently not working. If you change Celsius.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out why that is. It was working.
Let's
so
see input Celsius. Yeah, Fahrenheit works, but Celsius does not seem to.
Wait.
Length.
To fix you, it might be around here, because this is where things went a little bit funky. So if I remove that, see what happens. I mean, see, that works. So it has to. I don't know why it's why that's happening.
20. Oh, you were sending through a string or undefined.
Gotcha.
Undefined. So add that back to fixed 2. There we go.
That would be me.
But it's still not updating. So if the value is greater than 0, then it's undefined.
No. If the value.
So I think we're just missing some math there, because we're in negative numbers.
Oh no. So it's value.length.
It should just be value, right? Value.
No, these are the raw values, and so these should be strings coming through.
Yeah.
And then we do the whole math thing.
Okay. Okay.
It's part of that to fixed thing that's.
All right. Well, let's
messing that up.
Let's leave that off for now.
Yeah, we'll figure it out later.
No worries. Okay. So now, now it's working. just got a lot of extra decimals. That's fine. Simon in the chat saying you can use input.value as number to get the number represented instead of a string. I've not run into that before. It's pretty wild. So anyway, so create machine, temperature machine, we've got our context. And so on the Celsius event, which means we're updating the Celsius value, we're just going to assign C to that value. And then for Fahrenheit, we are essentially converting that number converting that string to a number here, and multiplying that by the conversion. And then for Fahrenheit, we're doing the same kind of thing, but assigning the value directly to Fahrenheit. And then Celsius gets the conversion there. And so the rest of this is just making that state machine kind of come to life and interact with the DOM. So we're interpreting that machine whenever it transitions, whenever the values are changed or whenever the state is changed. We are updating each of those inputs with the current value. Whenever those inputs are manually changed by the user, we trigger those send events based on the type and the value. So you get a nice coordination of those two, which is quite cool.
Yeah, and so, I mean, you might be thinking as a viewer that, you could just do all of the logic directly inside of the event listener and do all of that. But one of the main purposes of using XState as a state management library is that you're abstracting those events from the UI. So all of this works without a UI, and it doesn't matter where these events come from. So, again, I could do a set interval over here, and let's simulate global warming. Okay, so let's combine the two. So I'm just going to have a ink again, and so this is just going to be like the counter example. So what I'm going to do, and actually this is going to be really cool because I'm going to give you an example of another action that you could do. So I could say actions, and instead of assign, we're going to have the machine send itself an event. This is getting into more advanced XState, and I'm just showing you something that you can do just for fun. But we could say send, and so we could take the context, and so we expect, or this send function expects us to return an event that the machine will send itself. So we could say type Fahrenheit and value context dot f, and let's just make sure that's a number, +1. And so whenever we increment, it's just going to send itself the Fahrenheit events with some rising temperatures. So counter service dot send type inc. I have no idea if this will work, but we'll see. Oh, wait, did I? On value. Did I not do this right? I mean, the value is increasing. Let me just double check.
Yeah.
Because it should be also increasing Celsius, but
yeah,
it's not.
Yeah, C is coming through as undefined here. Is it because of the value length?
Oh, you know what? No, it's because and yeah, so yes and no. It's so that value.length, we're just making sure that if you put in an empty string, it doesn't try to do anything.
Right.
So what's a better way to do that, do you think?
Doing the conversion on the event, because on like the event listener itself to a number here, and so I've got it restricted to event or input type equals number. So yeah, so removing that already did it. So if we just change this to value that, it should continue to work. Yeah.
Nice. There we go. So now you could change things on the fly if you're quick enough. And it's just going to keep rising from there.
Oh boy.
Yep.
All right. So yeah, that's a nice state machine. Starting to add the complexity here, and getting some fun bits out of it, like that. Let me do a little something here, getting some consistency between our demos. Got some CSS there that I'm working on, and so yeah, should we go for challenge number 3? I think we have time.
Yeah, we could start it. That one is I don't know. It's a big jump from number 1 and 2 to number 3, but yeah.
So let's see. What is number 3? We got the flight booker.
So with the flight booker, you have a select or whatever you want for it to be that lets you indicate whether this is a one-way trip or a round-trip journey. You could enter a start date and a return date. Obviously, if you're doing a one-way trip, you could only enter a start date. And once both of those dates are valid, you could then submit. And
oh, okay, those are date values. I was thinking they were like some kind of coordinate for flying.
Right.
That's yeah. Okay. All right. So let me get this over here. And all right. So this is going to be our flight booker. Right. We'll still need 2 inputs. So this will be
2 inputs and a picker type of thing.
Yeah. What is it's start date
and return date.
Departing date.
Nope, just return date.
Depart date and return date. So this will be depart and return. We'll change these to date inputs. We're also going to need a select, or really some kind of toggle. It doesn't have to be select specifically. And I'll add styling for that. Don't worry.
Cool. And a book. So we could book it.
A book button. Yeah. All right, get that stylized here.
All right, this is going to be a fun one. Initial booking. So our state machine here is going to have 2 main states. It's going to have booking and booked, because obviously when you click book, assuming everything is valid, you're going to be booked. And if it's not, you're going to be staying in the booking states. So yeah. With booking, we could you know, there's 2 different options for us. We could do it one way, or we could do it round trip. So initially, we're going to have it be one way. Actually, no, we don't need that, just because that is a value from the select. So we're not going to overcomplicate it just yet. So I'm just going to put trip here and call it one way. And so for booking, so let's call it start date dot change That's just going to be sign start date value. So just a simple assignment over here. Oh, got to add the on over there. All right, so we have start date dot change, we have return date dot change, and we're introducing a new concept here, or a couple new concepts. First, we're introducing actual finite states, and we're introducing guarded transitions. So we could say context dot trip equals round trip. So we only want this transition to happen if if we're doing things in a round trip thing. So return date. Oh yeah. So if we do trip dot change, so actions sign trip. Oh, you're calling it departs and return?
Yes.
Okay, cool. That's fine. So I'm going to call it departs return dot change. So we have depart dot change, return dot change, which can only happen if we're doing a round trip. Trip dot change, which lets us change what trip we're doing, and also submit, of course. So we could submit. I'm doing things in lowercase. I have no idea why, but I just am. So target booked, or let's call it book target booked, and going to add some conditions here. So if context.trip is one way, our first condition is going to be that we actually have a start date. So return context.start date. Otherwise, return, we want, what do we want? Or depart state, just kidding. Depart state. So context dot depart state, and there's a context dot return date, and context dot return date is greater than context dot depart state. So that was one of the original requirements, is that obviously you can't return before you depart. That would be breaking the laws of physics and time. So obviously you shouldn't be able to do that. So I'm gonna console.log state.value and state.context. And so let's tackle each one of these. This is one of those things where React actually does make it a little bit easier, but that's okay.
Yeah.
Add events listener. Would it be change for select?
Yeah.
I guess so, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And change will work for inputs as well.
Okay. I mean, yeah, we could do that. I thought that change with inputs didn't toggle until you blurred the input with the regular DOM. React has sort of twisted the way it works, but yeah, we'll find out.
Yeah, shortly enough.
Yeah. So type trip.change value e.target.value. And the great thing is we could just copy and paste all of these. So we could add departs, return. And I misspelled this. This should be L inputs trip, L input departs. So we are calling this depart.change. And this is going to be return.change. L input return. Okay, so sending that. Oh, and our submit button.
Oh yes.
Oh, book. So const l book equals document.
Yeah. So in the chat, Simon Flack is saying input.value as date will give you a date object from the date input, which is interesting. That might be helpful for doing our conversions and such.
You know what? Let's try that. Hope you're right. Is it a function or what's it going to be?
We can look that up. Let's see. So I've not seen that before. Value as input. Let's go to an input element HTML. Okay, so let's value.
Okay, so it's not a function.
Yeah, I don't see that. That might be some kind of framework or something like that. If we wrap it.
Wait, that works.
What?
Yeah.
Okay, so if we change the date, yeah, it sure does. That's wild. Interesting. Okay, so you've got book, depart. Let me do this real quick. Go. Oh, just wrapping. Okay.
Do you have some disabled styles?
No, I do not yet. Let me add that. All right, so if it's disabled, it should have some opacity on it now. All right, so if we're on one way, but that's only when we transition, is that right? Input return, state the construct trip one way. Let's see if that's actually applying in the DOM. Yeah, it does have a disabled.
Oh, I think I still have start state. Where did I put? Oh, depart state. Makes sense.
Okay, there we go. Now it's just wasn't refreshing, so yeah, now it's working. Okay, nice.
I'm gonna do a.
Yeah, I was just about to say we can add a disabled
too.
state to that as well.
So I really ought to make this a helper function because there's something really, really cool that you could do with state machines. So when you think about like whether the book button should be disabled, you might be thinking, well, if it's one way, then we have to make sure we have a valid depart dates. If it's two ways, we have to make sure we have a depart and a return dates and blah, blah, blah. And so long story short, you're duplicating the logic of whether the book button should be valid or not based on logic that you already have in the state machine. So what you really want to ask is, I should disable the book button if clicking it is going to do nothing anyway. And that describes like the majority of disabled and enabled button use cases. So I could say, where's my machine? So machine.transition state book. So basically I'm doing a little test. I'm saying, okay, if I were to transition on book, will the states change? So all I have to do is say, is it changed? Then enable it, otherwise disable it. And there you go. So now, if you choose a date, you see that it becomes valid. If you change to round trip, it becomes disabled again until you select a date. And then you click book, and then the
date has to be valid.
Is booked. Yep. So we should also do something where we show that it was booked. So I'm going to add just a little div over here that says your flight has been booked. yeah, you could give it an ID or something, or a class. We've been using IDs everywhere. I feel like we're doing some seriously bad practices, but okay. So right now it always says your flight has been booked.
Yeah, we'll hide that. We can do a data state.
Yes, we can.
So what are we on here? What are the two states? Are booking and booked.
Yes. So we could, yeah, I'm going to put, well, I already got the app. So const L app equals documents, oops, query selector app. So we could say L app dot dataset dot states equals state dot value.
So just a simple display none, display block toggle. And
all right, let's try this out.
Booking. Booked. So, all right, so we're going one way at first. And then we can book, and our flight has been booked. That's great. But we can't exit out of that state. Is there a quick way to do that?
Well, what do you want to do?
Reset, essentially. Or
you know what? I'll leave it up to you.
Okay, so let's say L app, add event listener, click, send. Let's see, send reset.
Yeah, sure, whatever you want to call
it.
And
then in our booked state, we will listen for the reset event. Does it need to be caps? Is that the proper?
It doesn't need to be, and okay. You could just don't forget to put
it's on
yeah.
Reset. We will then transition to, let's see, we'll do target, right?
Mm-hmm.
Target booking.
And you also want to do one more thing. We want to reset those values, right?
We can, yeah. Let me test this logic first. Book. Oh, but that happens instantly. Because it's sending through.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a bit of a problem there.
Well, so you have to prevent stop propagation on the actual book button, or everything basically. Why don't you just have a reset button?
Sure, whatever.
Or yeah, put the reset button in your flight has. Yeah, there you go.
There we go. Let's close that out, and then we'll say L reset. Here we go. All right, so let's get our valid date here. Go book. Flight has been booked. Reset, and bam, we are back.
Mm-hmm.
That is great. I like that.
Yeah. And so, yeah, you saw how easy it was to, basically go back to the booking state. The object syntax, yeah, it gets a little bit confusing unless you're used to it, but we're thinking through some APIs and ways to make it easier to build these machines so you don't have to remember the object shape every time. But I'm just going to say actions assign. We are going to set the depart date back to undefined, the return date back to undefined, and the trip to one way. So just basically resetting everything. And you could abstract that out. But yeah, there you go.
Nice. That's very good. Look at that. We didn't even need to have a two-parter for this one.
Yeah.
Did we meet all the requirements?
I believe we did.
Date.
See what it says. So yeah, this was all about constraints. Now, the one constraint which we didn't do, which is a little bit tricky, is validating the dates. Now, we can do that, with some JavaScript magic. It has some built-in date functions to do that. But by using inputs type date, we sort of obviated that problem. No.
Right. Yeah, so we've got type date for those. So in theory, the user should not be able to put anything through that that would be invalid. There's of course a lot of edge cases of somebody hacking the DOM to change the input type, or browsers not supporting that input type directly. But we'll leave that as a exercise for the viewer. Oh, and David is mentioning, David Lure in the chat is mentioning button type equals reset, which will reset form values as well. We can technically make this a form.
Yeah, let's do that.
And let's test that out. That's a good tip there, David Lure. Thank you. Book reset, and yep, that changes out all our values. So that's really good. And there.
Also, do we have the form on here as well?
Well, I just made app the form itself.
Oh, okay. Because what we could do too is say lapp.add event listener, and now that it's a form, we could listen for resets, and then just send that reset event.
Oh, instead of tracking L reset.
Which are we doing still?
We currently are, yeah, but I can remove that and see. And we could even use, instead of clicking book, we could do submit on lapp. So do lapp, add event listener, submit, e.prevent default, send service book. That should do it for us. Book. Oh, no. So we need to do action on the form, I believe. I forget what the kind of null action to do there is.
Yeah.
Book.
And it's still doing it.
So hold on. I'm getting an error in the JavaScript. So I think lbook is not defined. Oh. So we need that. We do need that.
Well, form.
Well,
we could just disable.
Yeah.
Oh wait, no, we don't want to disable the form.
Yeah, document query selector. So we do need that actual selector. That's fine.
Right. Yeah.
We'll do that. All right. So that should. Let's see. Look. Yep. Nice.
Reset. There. But so apparently the reset thing isn't working.
Reset isn't working. Oh, you've got a caps there. That's hopefully it.
This is what TypeScript is for. But
yeah, that works.
Sweet.
Yeah, native JavaScript for the win. That's awesome. Okay, yeah. So let me actually walk through this machine now, because this is now complete, so it should be understandable to a layperson like myself. So we've got our machine here. Can you unhighlight that?
What am I doing?
Make it a little easier to read there. Sure. All right, so we've got our machine. The context we're tracking the depart date, the return date, and the trip style, essentially, so one-way or round trip. Our initial state, we're going to start in the booking state, so that's what we see right here. When we're in the booking state, we're going to be watching for these events. We're going to be watching depart change, return change, and trip change, and book, right? Yeah, those are all the events. So whenever the depart changes, we are setting our state for the depart date. We're assigning that context value. And on return change, we're changing the return date. And then on trip change, we're changing the trip context there. So for book, this is the event that we're going to send through for booking. right?
So we're going to the booked state, and we're only doing it if this is true.
Okay, right. So the conditions for that to be met are if the trip is one way, we just need to have a valid depart date. And otherwise, we need a valid depart date, a valid return date, and a valid, and the return date should be after the depart date.
Yeah.
Right. And then when we're in the booked state, we're just listening for the reset event, and we're transitioning back to the booking state and resetting our values in the context there.
You got it. And so what's interesting is that exact same description that you gave, which basically explains the whole logic of this thing. You could describe it in a visual way as well. And so I put the link in the chat if you want to click that.
Yeah. So we're in the booking, and it shows our different events that can happen. So depart change, return change, and trip change, and it's showing that it assigns those values. That's nice. And then booking, if we do the book event, it's going to transition us to the booked state. And then there's a reset event that transitions us back. So we book, it's conditional, and all that. Yeah, that's awesome. This is such a cool little visualizer. Very helpful.
Yeah, we've been working hard on it. So
yeah.
Well,
it shows. That's great. Okay, so wow, we did 3 of the 7 GUI task challenges. Let's do a quick summary here. So the very first one, we've got a very simple counter, starting out with our create machine. We're tracking the context. This is like React use state. This is our count. Whenever we trigger the count event, we just increment that value by 1. Beautiful. Love it. For our second challenge, this was the temperature converter. This starts getting a little more complex because we have 2 context values that we're tracking, the Celsius and the Fahrenheit, and we're tracking change events for both of those values. So you can change one or the other, and both will update accordingly. So when we change the Celsius, we're just assigning that value to the Celsius context, and then the Fahrenheit we convert using the special temperature math based on that same value. And if we are changing the Fahrenheit value, if we're sending that Fahrenheit change event, we're setting the Fahrenheit context there, and the Celsius context is going to be based off that with the special math. So that's awesome. All the other code is just hooking up the DOM and getting those values plugged in. That's really great. For the last challenge for today, this is our flight booker. So this has a lot more complexity here. We're creating a machine, our context that we're tracking, the depart date, return date, and trip. And our initial state is going to be booking. This is the first one where we actually have multiple states. So that's what this states object here is for, because we have our booking state and our booked state. So starting out in booking, whenever we change the depart, return, or trip, we're assigning those values. The book event is conditional based on those values being valid. And if we're doing a one-way trip, it just has to be one that's valid. And then we transition over to our booked state with this target property here. And in the booked state, we're only listening for the reset value. So nothing else should be triggering any kind of changes other than reset here. And we transition back to booking, and our actions reset, or our context is assigned to be reset. So this is something nice. Like if you were doing this in a way that wasn't a state machine, like all that I just talked about, the visualizer that we just like trying to piece those things together and follow the logic of the application would be so spread out. You'd be checking multiple files. You'd be checking, all these different kind of areas.
Right.
But by laying everything out in a state machine with very fixed kind of approaches to everything, you can really easily understand what's happening, especially if you just plug it into the visualizer. So yeah, that's the power of state machines, and XState in particular.
Exactly. Yeah, feel free to check out some of our past episodes where we used XState for animations. This isn't our first foray into XState, so yeah, lots of cool things you could do with it.
Yeah. Well, awesome work here, David. Thank you so much for walking us through setting up these state machines and kind of tackling these challenges. I think next week we'll try to return for the timer one. I think that'll be
that's a fun one. Yeah,
that'll be really fun. Let's see, concurrency, completing user signal interactions, responsiveness. Yes, and we'll go from there. Maybe we'll have time to tackle the next one. We'll see. But yeah, will you start our outro for us, David?
Sure thing. You can watch the full process of us creating these 3 animations for a deeper dive into each technique on the full live stream links below. Also, they're not animated, they're just forms. Leave us a comment if you have any questions.
That's more of a stepped animation, you know.
Yeah.
But yeah, our show is supported by our sponsors, CodePen at codepin.io, CSS Tricks at css-tricks.com, Stately at stately.ai, and viewers like you. You can pledge at patreon.com/keyframers and subscribe to our channel for more great content with all those links available below. Thank you all so much for watching. Until next time, adios, amigos.
Adios.